This episode is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your Raspberry Pi with our all-in-one arcade kit using genuine Sanwa arcade parts.
Hello cave dwellers. Cassette tapes really were the stalwart in the UK 8-bit micro scene, weren't they? But they were often looked down upon by viewers in the US, for example, who adopted the floppy disk in the home perhaps a little quicker than we did over here in the UK. And who can blame them? They may have been cheap, but boy were cassette tapes slow. Having read-in material on hand while you loaded up Gauntlet here, for example, was an absolute must, as was the ability to be able to turn down the volume on the machine and not have to listen to these screeching tones. We listened to those while it was loading, if indeed it did load without running into problems. But the humble cassette did offer one advantage. They held data in an audio format. The audio fed into the machine. In today's example, it will be a ZX Spectrum ear, where it demodulates the audio into the ones and zeros that it understands. And this made duplication and redistribution really easy. A tape-to-tape hi-fi was all you needed to copy a tape. As far as the hi-fi was concerned, it's all just audio. And of course, it was purely legal backups you were making of your own software. Yeah, of course it was. Data as audio would go on to become something we were all familiar with when dial-up modems became commonplace. And exactly the same thing was happening with the modem as with our cassette tapes. The word modem is a portmanteau of the words modulator and demodulator. It's the same principle, converting audio to data and data back to audio depending on if you're sending or receiving with the modem. The flexibility of audio as a distribution method saw programs appear not just on tape, but on the radio, via television programs, and also the subject of today's video, on vinyl records. Here's one here. Data on vinyl isn't exclusive to this example, but it's a great example. This is XL1 by Shelley. And we can see on the cover there's an angsty figure in an 80s shirt, and it reads, "Includes a computer program for the ZX Spectrum." On the reverse, that same figure, perhaps something of a peeping Tom, stands next to the track listings with titles such as Telephone Operator, Twilight, and I Just Want a Touch. But it's at the end of side 2 that we see the track named ZX Spectrum code, and below that some instructions on its use. The computer program on side 2 suits the ZX Spectrum home computer. It reads, "Transfer the program to your computer cassette player and start the program in sync with the first track of the LP." So just for fun, let's hear what that track sounds like now. Yeah, that's a computer program alright, try as I might, I just couldn't dance to it. The idea then is that once you've copied it onto a cassette, you can load it up and run the program in time with the LP for that music demo experience. The first such example of distributing software on a vinyl record that I could find was Chris Seavey's Camouflage, released in 1981, Pete Shelley's examples from 1983. You may know of another example that's earlier. If you've never heard of Chris, you may know him by the name he later used, which was Frank Sidebottom, and that record holds 3 programs for the ZX81 computer. And that wouldn't be the last time that Chris released a computer program. Anyway, let's demonstrate the Pete Shelley record today. I really do like the idea that an artist's put in that little bit of extra effort into an album before releasing it to give you what in the early 80s would have been a relatively new experience. Your computer rendering a music video on the fly. So, to enjoy this, we first need to transfer the program from the vinyl record to a tape, and there are a number of ways that we could achieve this. But to make it more entertaining and informative for you, I packaged this up and I posted it off to a friend who has intimate knowledge of audio recordings and audio equipment. And here's what he had to say.
Great news, it's arrived. Hold on a minute, how did they get this through the letterbox? Well, there's just some questions you don't want to know the answers to. Moving on. So, of course, we discussed this over email, but I don't know what the album is that he's sending me. Pete Shelley. No, not familiar with that one at all. So, yeah, I'll copy this across. No problem at all. Won't be an issue. But there are a couple of things you can do to make it perhaps load more successfully into a Spectrum. The first one is, you'd think, because I've got this big deck here, that this would be a good one to use. After all, it looks sort of quite imposing, like it knows what it's doing, all these buttons and things. That would be the wrong deck to record a Spectrum game on because it's too good. The sound quality is, if anything, a little bit too rich. Of course, you've got to switch off all the Dolby and all those kind of things, so you're not muffling any of the sound out, but still, you're better off with something like this. This is one of the reasons everyone had something like this next to their computer, because these were better off at loading games than one of these. The main reason isn't just because of the sound quality, although the fact this sounds really tinny and harsh and nasty, the kind of thing you really don't want to listen to, but the exact thing that the Spectrum likes to listen to. It likes tinny, harsh and thin and nasty. It doesn't like rich and bassy. But the main thing is it's got a mono head in here. Now, this deck has got a stereo head, and even things like this with just one speaker on, it's still a stereo recorder. And you can put the outputs into a stereo device. But this, it's got a mono head. I'll explain the difference between a mono head and a stereo one and how it lines up with a cassette tape. I'll just stick my computer on and we'll just have a look. A standard stereo music cassette tape splits the width of the tape, which is just 1/8 of an inch across, into 4 individual tracks. You've got the left and right stereo pair headed in either direction. Now, as you can appreciate, the tolerances there are very fine to avoid any crosstalk between the channels or the audio going in the other direction. You have to have the tape perfectly aligned. Now, when cassettes first appeared on the scenes in the early 1960s, it was a mono system. You just had one track going in either direction. And it's this track layout that was used for the data on a Spectrum cassette. It doesn't need to be in stereo, so they can just use half the tape width. Now, you can, of course, reproduce this using a stereo device. However, if your heads are misaligned, you can get weird echoes and things between the different tracks. Much better to reproduce it using a mono tape head, and even if it is misaligned, you've still got quite a bit of tape width to play around with, so that you can still get that data read by the Spectrum. So that is why you'd often experience more loading errors if you were trying to load a game off, say, a decent quality Walkman than you would if you loaded it off a nasty piece of rubbish like this. Now, this looks ancient history, but you might have spotted it's got a USB port on there. This dates from sometime after 2008 because it was a Bush branded Argos device. Argos took over the Bush brand in 2008. I got this on eBay about a year ago, and it says it was refurbished. The reason I got this is because I've ordered a Spectrum Next a couple of years back, and I thought this would be the ideal thing to load my collection of games into it with. Unfortunately though, it doesn't have an input on the side. This is what I was going to use to copy the record across. So because I can't use this to record with, I am going to have to record in stereo. I'm not going to do it on this. I don't think I'm going to do it on that. I've been testing the wow and flutter. It's a little bit off on that. It's not as good as my Walkman WM-D6C. So I'm going to record one version onto that, and then I'm going to take the record downstairs and record the other version using the proper hi-fi. Right, so now I'm going to record on the other side of the tape using this hi-fi setup here. So the turntable is a DP47F from Denon, recording onto a Sony TCK333ESJ cassette recorder, and the tape that I'm using is the same one. I didn't mention before, I'm using a chrome tape because chrome tape is better at capturing high frequencies. Type 1 tape tends to cut those off a little bit, but it's better at capturing the lower frequencies. So much better to use a chrome tape, a Type 2, for something like a Spectrum game, because as you could hear from that loading sound, it's all more towards the higher end of the Spectrum. Now on this one, again, I'm not using any kind of noise reduction. However, I am using Dolby HX Pro, which is a headroom extension. That's the HX. It means it captures higher frequencies better. You don't need to have it on the playback device. It's something that only happens at the recording stage. So might as well switch that one on. But that's it. Let's get this one off and running as well. And I'll show you on the oscilloscope what a Spectrum game looks like as it's loading. Right, so that's my bit done. All I need to do is post the record back and stick this cassette into one of these nice red boxes I've got. and I'll put that into a cassette mailer, and if I can figure out how to put that together, it's on with the rest of the video.
And here is our tape, as well as the LP over here, which came back from Matt all ready to go, and I was very excited to tear it open and fire up the Specky. Matt even labelled it with a suitably retro label printer, which looks great, and notice just what a short tape it is. The tape is super short, it's probably under 5 minutes long, and that's good for computer programs because of course the more tape there is, the more chance there is of it stretching out, and that would distort the audio and make the data unreadable. We'll try the side labelled Walkman first to see if that works, and we do get the familiar loading bars, which is a positive sign. After a couple of minutes the program does indeed load, or at least side 1 does, because we listen to side 1 of the LP with the first part of the program, and then it's a multi-loader. We hit 2 to load the second part, and it loads a little bit more from tape. So all I need to do now is drop the needle on the record and hit 1 on the keyboard to play side 1, or 2 if we were on side 2. Now I can tell you that while the Walkman copy worked for side 1, when I tried to load side 2 we did hit a program error. The hi-fi copy of the tape, on the other hand, worked perfectly for both parts, so the hi-fi is Techmoan's winner for today's transfer competition. And I'm glad he took the time to try both methods, as well as enable those extra features he had on his hi-fi. Maybe it was that managed to get it through and get us a working copy. Now, instead of just capturing a little bit of the program, what I'm going to do is capture the entire thing for you, along with the music from the record player, so you can dip in and have a listen to a little bit of it, or you can watch and enjoy the entire thing. Maybe that kind of music is your thing and you can enjoy the entire 45-minute program coupled with the music. To see that, there's a link at the top of the screen now, I hope, or if you can't find that, then have a look in the description to the video and there'll be a link that you can click on. And you can see some of that on the screen now. But before you do, let's consider why this idea didn't catch on. There really are very few examples of data on vinyl. You have to admit, it's not the most convenient process, more of a novelty. Vinyls were dying out in favour of cassettes and CDs at this time, which were just as capable at distributing programs, but most bands, understandably, would have wanted to put music on their precious tape space or save money by using shorter tapes, rather than cater to us geeks and nerds. Why would they? I mean, video games were increasing in popularity, as was computer ownership, but the market wasn't what it is now. It wouldn't even have been on the radar of many music execs as a way to leverage their market and make more money. However, if you're looking for more examples, you will find the band the Thompson Twins released their own adventure game. This was also for the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64, I think, as well. And it was released on a flexi disc, which was mounted on the cover of Computer and Video Games magazine in 1984. I think the Commodore 64 one was a bit later, maybe 85, but it's around about then. Shakin' Stevens released the Shaky Game on the B-side of its The Bop Won't Stop album. And if you want more recent examples, Radiohead hid a ZX Spectrum program on their 2017 release of the OK Computer album. That was the 20th or 20th, I think it was the 20th anniversary of that album. So they released it and they hid that ZX Spectrum program on OK Computer. But you'd be hard pressed to call any of these programs worth the cost of the disc or the tape alone. Again, it was a novelty, a bit of fun, and just a bit extra. But in a way, the programs that were released by bands, at least, were an acknowledgement from those bands that we loved, that they too were techies like us. And that perhaps made their music feel a little bit more special to people like you and I, to us nerds and us geeks who thought perhaps we were isolated in our love of these machines. To have that affirmation from the bands that we loved, I think that was a special thing. So until next time, please take a moment to go and watch the Shelley program, live captured for you. Maybe put yourself back into 1983. Home computers were relatively new to you. You drop the needle on your record player, and then this happens. It may not blow your socks off today, but I think it would have felt pretty special back then. So I hope you enjoyed the demo. A special thank you to Matt at Techmoan for transferring those tracks from the vinyl to the cassette tape for us, and for his insights. Thank you very much, Matt. And of course to you for watching. Enjoy the demo, take care, and goodbye.
Thanks to everyone who watched this episode, and especially to the names on the screen. These are the official cave dwellers, the patrons of the channel who signed up over at Patreon.com. You can find a link to that in the description of the video if you fancy lending your support. And if you haven't already done so, take a moment to subscribe and come back soon for more videos. Thank you again, and take care.
Just because I love you, it makes me feel warm, like a kitten, sunshine.